Keir Starmer might be about to sign us up to reparations by the back door. Starmer could sign us up to a Commonwealth summit communique that references slavery reparations but says this would not necessarily mean there's a change of policy. That's according to Whitehall sources. Well, just look how uncomfortable Keir Starmer is here. Yeah, grief. He just got off a 28-hour flight, walked straight into a room full of people demanding we pay hundreds of millions of pounds in reparations. But he has literally walked straight into it. Here are all the times that David Lammy, the man he appointed as Foreign Secretary, has banged on about reparations.
So reparations, what does that look like for those Caribbean nations? How do we make that work? What's the dialogue we as a country need to have? Part of that discussion then brings the story of reparations back on the table. Because the truth is that the people who got reparations after slavery were the slave owners.
I mean, there's more. There's a tweet from 2018 saying, in 1833, Parliament passed the Slavery Abolition Act, £17 billion of compensation to slave owners for the loss of their property, my ancestors. The slaves received no reparations. Some people simply do not know their history or do not want to know hard truths. He thought he'd get away with this one, actually, but he hasn't, because when he was on Keir Starmer's front bench in 2020, he went on a Boston-based radio station and said the starting point is truth and reconciliation. We're no longer a society where we question notions like white privilege. That's interesting, by the way, isn't it? We are no longer a society where we question notions like white privilege, aren't we? And then we get to a point where we have to discuss power and reckoning and repairing, and that, to some extent, is obviously financial and involves endowments. His words. At a Guyana High Commission event in 2018, Mr Lammy was asked what future UK relationships with the Commonwealth should be. He replied, "One of the things that comes across to me is how well they have done with what they were left." And part of that discussion then brings the story of reparations back on the table. Because the truth is that the people who got reparations after slavery were the slave owners. No reparations were ever given to the slaves. Right, there we go. And there's loads of it. And there's obviously that infamous one that we played you earlier on in the show of him saying, we want reparations. Pretty clear, really. This week, Sir Hilary Beckles, the chairman of the Caribbean community, said that David Lammy should have a, quote, free hand to push for slavery reparations within government. Might that be because Lammy attended a pro-reparations rally hosted by Beckles in Parliament in 2016? David Lammy has now completely changed his mind, has he? No chance. So the Foreign Secretary is compromised. 9 Labour MPs serve on the all-party parliamentary group for African reparations. The Labour MP Clive Lewis has been given £50,000 by the Repair campaign, a campaign for reparations, to employ a parliamentary researcher for the group in 2021. Keir Starmer's leader of the opposition's office published a report called Remaking the British State for the Many, Not the Few. We've heard that line before, haven't we? And that demanded Labour stands for reparations. Keir Starmer himself even urged Prince William and Princess Catherine to go further after they actually called slavery abhorrent during their trip to the Caribbean in 2022. He added, "Before I was a politician, I was a lawyer, and I did a lot of work in Commonwealth countries, including in the Caribbean and in Africa. I've been to Jamaica many, many times, and the Bahamas and Barbados with work. I know just how strong the connection is between those countries and ours." Well, what's the implication there, Sir Keir? And now he's in power, and all these countries know his track record and what pressure he's under from within his own party. And they've come to collect, haven't they? This is what happens when you spend your life virtue signalling, taking the knee, race baiting and talking Britain's history down. It's a matter of time before Starmer's got the chequebook out. Let's get thoughts on my panel. We've got the wonderful GB News presenter Nana Aquia, we've got Tory peer Lord Bailey and ex-Labour Party advisor Matthew Larzer. Nana, how long before Starmer's got our chequebook out, do you reckon?
Well, I don't know why he's doing that because, I mean, look, David Lammy, I mean, you missed one quote that he said. He said he would like to take the responsibility of being the first Foreign Secretary descended from the slave trade incredibly seriously. He said his Ghanaian parents would not have believed their skinny son in NHS prescription glasses who got stopped and searched on the streets at Tottenham could end up reaching the Foreign Office. I mean, he's literally proved his point there by proving that actually, because of slavery, that's why he's here, that's how he got his job as Foreign Secretary, so it hasn't done him any harm at all. If he stayed in Guyana, if his family had stayed there, I wonder whether he'd amount to that much. So I think this whole call for reparations is absolute rubbish. The assumption that if you, because these countries were colonised, that they are worse off. In actual fact, a lot of these countries are better off because of colonisation. But the bottom line is this: if they really want reparations, and the Caribbean countries in particular, they need to go back to Africa, because they were coming from Africa and dropped in the Caribbean. So it was the Africans who sold them, their own people, as slaves to the English or the white people, and then some of them went to Jamaica. So there's no point really coming back to the English people, because Africa still have slaves.
OK. Well, do you think that Starmer will cave in? The noise at the moment is he's saying no. I find it very hard to reconcile that with, well, thoughts from within his own Labour Party, his own Foreign Secretary, and stuff he's said in the past.
I think he's got a real problem here because, first and foremost, his Foreign Secretary has for years championed this. You could say whatever you want about David Lammy, he's been consistent. He's been very, very consistent on this. That's the first thing. Secondly, I've attended many meetings across the years where lots of different Labour MPs have made noises of how they support it. Now, the people who are campaigning for reparations will expect their support or know that it was just hot air. But all of that provides Starmer with a problem because he's going to have to quell that call in his own
Could
party.
someone bring it to a vote in Parliament? Is there a way?
Look, when you're the government, yeah, people could put a private member's bill in, all kinds of stuff.
That could be a trouble.
And of course, they have the Foreign Secretary leading that charge, which means they have some real weight there. But there's bigger issues as well. Who gets reparations? Why they get reparations? For instance, as a black person from Africa, I know a little bit about my history. I would argue, how comes we're not asking the Arabs for reparation? Because they had the biggest slave trade ever. They kind of beat white people to it. The point is there's a lot to be said about slavery, and I'm sure the people who've been campaigning about reparations know where they want the money from, but they need to have a broader conversation. But particularly for Starmer, this could be a real problem because people really believe in this, Lammy really believes in this, and they mightn't let it go.
Matthew, just have a look at that picture that's behind me there, if we can. Keir Starmer there.
The poor guy's just got off a 28-hour flight, as you said, Patrick.
He's massively out of his depth, isn't he?
He's not out of his depth. If you've been following the tweets from the press pack who are on the plane with him, they're all a little bit cream-crackered, to put it mildly. Look, I think it's been absolutely clear today that reparations is just not on the agenda. You played clips of both him, or quoted from him, and played a clip of Rachel Reeves as Chancellor, who said that's just not an option. To be honest with you, David Lammy did grandstand in opposition, particularly when, I think when he wanted to be Mayor of London and he was pitching it to the left, he picked up on issues which he hadn't done before. I think David Lammy needs to make clear that even though he himself has expressed, pro-reparation statements in the past, it's the policy of the government. He will stick to the policy of the government, and the policy of the government is it's not an issue.
Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
Do you believe Starmer can get him to do that? Do you think Starmer can go in the office and say, David, I want you to go and tell anybody who listens that
yes,
the position?
because absolutely, because he's not even going to have to do that, because Lammy is going to be asked about this when he's not on Samoa. He'll be asked more questions about this. And look, there's the concept of collective cabinet responsibility applies to all cabinets, and it will apply to this one. If he doesn't do that, then he won't be in the cabinet.
That's my point. Again, I'll say it. David Lammy has been very consistent on this. I would be impressed if Starmer can get him to say that, and that's where the problem lies.
Well, I think David Lammy's got to realise if he wants to be Foreign Secretary, he has to be a team player, and he has to leave any beliefs he had, any policies he was doing which aren't the government's policy at the door.
I do think, Keir Starmer so far has not exactly been a master negotiator when it looks at, the unions, etc. Chagos Island, for example. We even seem to have concocted some bizarre deal, whereas I understand it, if someone turns up on the Chagos Islands and wants to seek asylum, we still have to pay for everything, which is a bit...
Well, there's currently people under arrest on the Chagos Islands because no civilians were allowed on the Chagos Islands. Yeah. So some people landed from Sri Lanka. The Americans have arrested them and are trying to try them. The trial's a bit of a mess. Right, okay. And so they may have to go to St Helena to get them off, yeah.
Right, OK, fine.
Because it's a classified military base.
Cool, but my point is that, do we believe that he's going to be able to negotiate his way out of this one?
He shouldn't even try. The call for reparations runs deep. He stands a bigger chance of offending than getting it right.
I don't understand why there's such focus on the past when right now all the stuff that we're using, we know that this stuff's been made by, you know, slave labour and things like that. So
yeah, modern slavery.
I find it incredible that we should, you know, people like David Lammy should grandstand, yet there he is holding his phone and his laptop and all that. Why doesn't he deal with some of that instead?
I mean, I think we have a responsibility as a society to the world and to those countries that we did colonise.
What responsibility?
And one of those responsibilities is development aid, which we already give. Absolutely. So I'm saying I think we already play our part.
But it goes, for me, it goes deeper. Why? We're only asking Britain. There's been other nations that have colonised, that have had huge slave trades. They should be part of the argument as well. And all I'd want to say to David Lammy is, the call you're making on Britain, are you making that call on other, for instance, Arab countries?
Yeah.
What about Haiti? They've had trouble with modern-day slavery as well. You know, where are they in the conversation?
I think this is where you end up, don't you? After you spend a political career virtue signalling, taking the knee quite literally in some cases, being borderline anti-monarchy, or in the case of Keir Starmer, being out-and-out anti-monarchy, but going on a remarkable transformation there.
Well, Liz Truss gave a speech at the Lib Dem conference calling for the abolition of the monarchy.
But I think his transformation happened. Something went off. What was it? Was it the night? I don't know. Anyway, but then yeah, and virtue signalling, all of this stuff, calling for stuff like this. Then you find yourself accidentally in power one day, and all of a sudden you are a massive hypocrite.
Well, I don't think he's a hypocrite.
He also said that his ancestors got nothing. This is what David Lammy says, but the truth is that the slaves were actually... The bond for the slaves was paid so they could be free. So although the money didn't go to them directly because the trade was legal, it meant that you couldn't just dump the business and not give them any compensation, in a sense. So all the slaves were bought, paid for, so that they could be free. So, I mean, that's...
I don't think Keir's been a hypocrite, because Keir hasn't called for reparations. I think David Lammy has to make clear himself, and I think it will be interesting to hear what he says over the next few days. He's obviously spoken pro-reparations in the past, and he has to make clear that he supports the government's policy.
I mean, look, I know, I get that you know, which side of the political fence you're on.
Yeah,
and you do,
I don't think his position is untenable. If he supports the government's policy, he has to make clear he does.
Trump issue. You know, we've got a bloke there now, so we've got two big foreign policy things happening literally right now. We've got a US election and we've got reparations. And David Lammy has called the bloke who might be about to become the President of the United States again a neo-Nazi sympathising, woman-hating sociopath, and he's openly called for reparations like 8 times, right? How can he be our Foreign Secretary?
He's not fit for office, is he?
Well, because I mean, a lot of people have said things about Trump when they're not in they're not in government, including Kamala Harris herself has called him a fascist this week.
But she's his opponent, and also she's a...
It's not a secret, particularly this week with our lovely volunteers there, which party Labour supports in America.
That's what I think is the bigger issue. I actually think is political election interfering for one political party, particularly the party of government, to send its activists to campaign for somebody else.
But you've seen Robert Buckland from your party.
Let's be very clear. Let's be very clear. If it was the other way round, we'd have... Imagine Trump said, right, I'm going to fund £200 million worth of campaign or 20 quid worth of campaign. People over here...
Hang on, Nigel's been over to campaign for him.
Particularly on the left, would have an absolute kitten.
Hang on. Robert Buckland, who was the Tory Attorney General, has said that he has gone over... and he's still a Tory. He's still in your party, Sean. He's still... Hang on. He's still in your... Yeah, he's still a politician.
You're the party of government.
Sean, he has said, he has made clear that whilst he was still a member of Parliament, he went to campaign for the Democrats, he campaigned against Trump, he's a Tory, he thinks it's an absolute
Let's be clear.
And you think Nigel's in the wrong for going to campaign?
If we come back to David Lammy, he's just in the wrong job. He shouldn't be doing that at all, because he's meant to be a diplomat, and he's meant to be somebody who can negotiate with other nations. And if he's talking like that about Donald Trump, he's not fit.
I think he has to be diplomatic in office, which he has been. These are comments from the past. He's got to stick to the government line while he's in office. If he doesn't, he's in trouble. If he does, he's fine.
Shouldn't have got the job in the first place.
I just wonder. I wonder if the shoes on their foot. So imagine there was an American politician who'd been horrendous about Keir Starmer. I wonder if he'd get a war.
Yeah, Donald Trump called him a sort of far-left socialist or something the other day. He's hardly a far-left socialist. He's hardly a far-left socialist.
He is.
They'll be calling him a communist before the week is out.
I know lots of people would be happy to be called a far-left socialist.
Keir's not one of them.
All right. Well, a lively start. Good stuff. Thank you very much. And I have got quite a lot coming your way. I'm going to reveal the true cost now of asylum seeker accommodation, which, shock horror, has gone up again. But it's